Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to our monthly special ed PTA meeting. Today we're going to be talking about the particular stress that moms and special ed students face. We spend a lot of our time talking about our kids, but today we're going to be talking about us. So I thought that was a good idea. In a minute, I'm going to introduce Dr. Stephanie Leary, but before that, I just want to point out with us today is our new CSE chair for grades 8 through 12, Christy Evers. And she's joined us this summer, and for those of you who haven't met her, I can say that she is lovely to work with, a lovely person, and we look forward to lots of meetings going forward in the future. And we also have Dr. Heidi McCarthy with us, our director, especially. We have Beth Dalrymple, our PTA president, and Deb Donaldson from our Chappaqua library, and our regular committee members. So thanks everybody for coming today. So, mom stress, we're calling this as shorthand. We have Dr. Stephanie Leary, who will introduce herself. She's a psychologist that works with schools and families and students. So with that, Stephanie, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucille. Thank you guys for coming this morning and for wanting to tune into a really important topic. Lucille reached out to me, I think it was probably a little over a month ago, maybe even 6 weeks, with some articles that were talking about moms and stress, and I mean, it's probably just part of the job title of raising kids, but taking it a step further, if you have a child with a special need, everything seems to be turned up in intensity, and stress comes along with that. So when Lucille emailed me, I said, yes, I want to talk about this. I'll be there, we'll figure it out, and I'm really glad it worked out. I'll tell you a little bit more about my background so that you know where I'm coming from when I'm talking about this and giving some suggestions. I am a clinical psychologist and I specialize in neuropsychology, which means I'm sort of a brain geek and I love understanding the way our brains and behavior connect, especially when it comes to kids and their behavior and parents and our behavior as parents. So that's my professional credentials. I have a practice in Mount Kisco where I work with families and children doing therapy and doing testing. And then more recently, I started really reflecting back on my own experiences as a mom. I have an 8-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter, and the different stresses and factors that parents have to juggle every day, because we do not get a day off. You guys know this. And I started blogging, and I have a book coming out in January called Parenting in the Real World. So there's more of my insights available there. And the reason I really wanted to jump on Lucille's idea with regard to self-care for moms with special needs kids is because in my book I write a whole chapter on self-care. And I really wanted it to be the first chapter in the book because I think it is the most important thing to be focusing on as a parent. And then I was told by all sorts of people, don't put it as the first chapter. I was like, why? Why not put it as the first chapter? And the reason is because parents, moms in particular, technically speaking, don't want to buy a book and open up the first chapter and see that it's about self-care. And so it's actually the last chapter in my book, begrudgingly put there, because I figure I really want you to have it in your hands at some point. So for me to be able to come and spend an hour plus sort of talking about this and sharing my thoughts feels like a real gift. And I'm grateful that everybody here decided to show up to hear about it. With regard to my own parenting experiences and the special needs topic that we're talking about today, I do have 2 children, as I explained. My oldest, who's 12, who's a 7th grader, not in this county, does have ADHD, and she does have dyslexia. And those were issues that started to come up for her when she was very, very young, and she was my first. And I would have thought that because of what I do for a living, that I would have been totally all over it. And I would have known it, and I would have seen it, and I wouldn't have been stressed out. But what I learned really quickly was when it comes to parenting, it doesn't always matter what your job title is, or if you have a degree, what that's in. You can be a teacher, a special educator, a physician, whatever it is. When it is your child, you're just mom all of a sudden. And it was a very humbling experience for me to be able to parent my daughter. And I was very aware of the way that it impacted my work, because prior to that time, I wasn't a mom. And so I was sort of novice in giving parents advice and assistance, and I think I did the best job that I could. But I was a mom now, and not only a mom, but a mom to a child with special needs. And for me, what it allows me to do is to say, I've sat on both ends of the couch, I've sat on both sides of a CSE meeting, both advocating for and supporting parents, and then advocating for my own children. And in the big picture, I'm very well aware of the fact that there are many, many children who have disabilities that are more serious and more far-reaching than my daughter does. But I also recognize from raising my son the difference, because he doesn't have ADHD and he doesn't have a learning disability. And sure, there are ups and downs. I mean, I'm not saying that parenting anyone is a super easy job, but there is a difference. So I wanted to start there today, after just giving you some background, and talk about the fact that stress in parenting is real. But when you're parenting a child with a special need, that stress becomes a larger mass. And it becomes tricky because, you know, you can sort of think you imagine it, and you can look around and say, oh, but I don't, you know, have it as bad as this person who's dealing with these other things. And we sort of say, you know, it could be worse. But in reality, there's a lot of stress. I talked earlier about those balls that we juggle. When your child has a special need, there are more balls. They're moving faster, and if you drop them, they're more important. You know, it's harder to pick up the pieces sometimes. So that in and of itself creates stress. The other thing that gets tricky about stress and parenting is we are creatures of habit. So if you're experiencing a high level of stress, whether it's about finding out a diagnosis or suspecting a diagnosis, or even just getting into the routine of managing everything you need to for your child, that becomes your normal. And so as a creature of habit, you sort of become to expect that and can lose some of the clarity at times about the extra things that you're doing, or just the extra issues that you're facing and having to manage. Because stress isn't just about having to carpool somebody and get them somewhere, or make sure this is purchased to be put in the school bag, or keeping an appointment. Stress, especially for moms, happens here a lot of the times. So even when you're not doing, it's the extra stuff you have to think about. It's the extra stuff you have to worry about if you're worrying enough about it. You know, it can be sort of never ending. And when that becomes your normal, it's sometimes hard to check in and recognize that your level of stress is much higher than typical, and maybe even much higher than your body, or, you know, you're really comfortable carrying around. So I'm seeing some heads nodding, which makes me feel like, good, you guys get this. I don't have to do too hard of a sell with the stress. I told you earlier, I'm sort of a geek when it comes to brain-behavior relationships, which means that even if you're in this sort of, you know, soldiering mentality and your brain isn't registering all of these things, guess what does register it? Your body. And we'll talk more about that later, you know, the clues that you can tune into to make sure you're attending to yourself. But first I wanted to just go through the different areas of stress that parenting can sort of lend to, and actually ask you guys to do a little bit of a mental exercise and think to yourself, okay, for my child or children, if you have more than one, what is it that I'm really managing in this category? To just demonstrate and give you guys like 10 minutes where no one's calling you or needing you, or, you know, you can just have your own mind space to take stock a little bit. And it's actually good, because while I was preparing for this, I had to do it for myself, for my own kids, and it's always really, it's an insight when you can stop and really think about it. So the first area that I'll ask you guys to think about with regard to parenting, and if there's any stress in this area, has to do with behavior. Parents have to manage kids' behavior from the time they're born. We have to keep them safe, we have to make sure it's appropriate, rules are followed, limits are set. And if your child has a special need, that set of weaknesses and strengths very certainly influences their behavior and the amount of energy you have to devote to that behavior. And I also want you to think here, if you have more than one child, what is the impact of all of that? Does it affect other children? Do you feel like you're having to wear two hats and you're parenting using two different sets of rules? Or, you know, do you ever sit back and think to yourself, my goodness, you know, what am I teaching my other children? What's being modeled? So all of that with regard to behavior. And then to take it a step further, how much time and effort do you put into either actually managing or thinking about managing how your child's behavior outside of your home is going to be received, whether it's on the bus or in a waiting room or in a classroom or in contact with other places in the community. So behavior is a pretty big category. Socialization. So you have to behave in a social situation. And there are a whole bunch of factors that go into our ability to socialize as human beings. Language has to come into account, the ability to engage and focus, the ability to find a peer that's a good fit, because I sort of view kids like that, like puzzle pieces, how sometimes there's a great fit, and sometimes even for kids without any special needs, there's not. It's more important if your child has a special need to attend to the way those puzzle pieces fit together and managing that social end of things. Academically, so we're in a middle school, and it's the SEPTA-sponsored event, and our children need to be educated regardless of their challenges, their strengths, their disabilities. And there's a bit, I feel like, of a treadmill that if you have a child who's developing, typically, whether it's at preschool or kindergarten, you sort of get on the treadmill and you check in, and it's like, okay, who are the good teachers and who are the teachers where it might be a rough year? But you're on the treadmill and there are other people there, and you just sort of go. And I mean, I'm minimizing this, but eventually you'll get to 12th grade and you'll go through the paces, and your kids will get where they need to go. And if your child has a special need, it's like you stepped on that treadmill, and if anyone's had that faux pas, it just turns off and you keep going and you're flat on your face and everyone else is still walking. That's the analogy that I sort of use when it comes to managing academic experiences for students with special needs. And I remember it myself because my son, who had some issues with motor stuff and speech stuff when he was young, so we went to early intervention and then CPSE. And at that time, because he was really little, I was doing evaluations for early intervention and CPSE. So I knew the deal, and I knew the people, and it seemed sort of, I felt like I was on the treadmill and it was going fine. And I remember so clearly my husband saying, do I need to come to this meeting? It was an IFSP meeting. So that's another thing you need to learn if you're a parent of a special needs child. Acronyms and, abbreviations for things. And I said, no. I've been to dozens of these. It's not going to be a problem. I've totally got this. And I went to the meeting, and I knew the people that were there, and I had read the reports in advance. And 15 minutes into the meeting, I was completely blindsided. I probably sort of dissociated, because what was going on was my child, right? I was emotional. I wasn't thinking. I was hearing all this information, these numbers about my son and speculations about what might be going on. And I got through the meeting somehow. And I remember being in the car, calling my husband, hysterically crying, and I'm sort of not really a crier. He probably thought, I don't know, that I got in a car accident, and just saying I couldn't handle that. So for me, that was my first experience of, I thought I was just getting on a treadmill, but things weren't happening typically for my child, and I so was not prepared for it. I think the fact that I thought I was prepared for it made the fall a little harder. But when it comes to academics, if your child does have a special need, it's super important to recognize the amount of time, energy, and just mental effort you put into managing that. Because there's a lot of moving pieces there alone. Functionally, so communication, ability to physically get around, life skills, so maturation, things that when the other kids are learning to tie their own shoelaces at a certain age, I don't know, is your child? Is that just something that's remained on your mom checklist when maybe other siblings are able to do it or other kids are able to do it? Getting dressed in the morning, figuring out, I was never happier than when my youngest learned how to climb up the countertop to be able to get a plastic cup for himself and scale the front of the refrigerator to get a cheese stick. To me, that was such a bonus, because it meant that maybe I didn't have to leave the shower only half done, to make sure no one was, falling from somewhere, right? So that is a hallmark that maybe not every kid meets or doesn't meet on the same timeline. So as a mom, as a parent, you absorb that, and that becomes something that you're just, it's on your list every day. You just do it. What about emotionally? So that's the other thing. Whether it's the emotions of your child who might be struggling or who has different needs, the emotions of your other kids who are reacting to that, and the emotions of your entire family. So there's grief sometimes. There's grief a lot of times, even if we don't recognize it. Even if the disabilities our children are struggling with seem in the big picture not to be that big of a deal, it's hard. It's hard as a mom to see other kids doing something that you know your child probably wants to be doing, but for some reason it's not happening that way. And not saying that all parents don't experience that. If your child has a special need, it happens more often. And that emotion is something that as moms we generally contain for our kids. And unless we have a place to process it and deal with it and get it out, we carry that too. So it's getting heavy, right? There's lots of things. We're getting heavy here. Little things, right? Little things like related services and medical stuff and doctors and appointments and tutors and learning specialists and speech therapists and occupational therapists and physical therapists and physiatrists and medication management, and do I even need medication management, and am I a bad mom if I do it or if I don't do it? And what about the pharmacy that changed a brand, or the insurance company that then said, right? So these are the little things. These are those little things, and that maybe even within families, one parent or one partner is sort of like, well, that's not that big of a deal. And the partner doing it is like, this is a full-time job. Like, actually, I'm now an insurance representative and a scheduler, and and then one day your kid wakes up and they don't like their tutor. Right, so the little stuff here is enough to make your head spin on any given day. So there's all of that. And then everything sort of interacts with the other. So you can have the best laid plan and you can have everything organized, and I see moms, and I for a long time was one of them, with binders or folders or notebooks trying to keep track of whether it's information. Do we know if this medicine is working? Do we know what these symptoms are doing? What's going on with sleep? What's going on with food? So keeping track of all this information and organizing it all. And then if your child, what if they just get sick, like a normal strep throat on top of it? Everything can sort of topple down, because everything here related to special needs parenting are things that you wake up in the morning and probably don't acknowledge. It's a lot, right? It's heavy. It's all happening at once, and there's no one tapping you on the shoulder saying, you're doing a lot. And your kids aren't, generally speaking, saying, hey, thanks for this stuff. A lot of times, our children are saying, no one else needs this, you're so mean, I feel weird, or I don't even know, or worse things than that, So you're giving a lot, right? Giving a lot of time, giving a lot of energy. Not a tremendous amount of positive reinforcement coming back, and no one's there really recharging your batteries or saying, hey, you need a day off, you need a break. So we've established that parenting involves stress. We've established that parenting a special needs child involves a higher level of stress, more things to be managing, and the stakes seem super high. So you don't get a day off from being a special needs parent. Your child doesn't get a day off from whatever they're facing. So there's a weird thing that happens. You can start to almost feel guilty sometimes for wanting to take a break or mentally shutting off. I know that in the process of trying to figure out what was going on with each of my kids, I would almost feel guilty in the morning if I just watched mindless TV instead of researching something or looking for an answer or talking to other people. And that can become a really interesting dynamic that leads to what I call mommy guilt. And if dads are watching this, because it'll be on replay too, daddy guilt is an adequate substitution if you're experiencing it. It's where we're in this chronic stressful situation, and then that becomes the norm. And if you depart from it, God forbid you say, I'm human, I need, to take 10 minutes for myself, or an hour, or a day, then it can feel like such a departure. You feel like you're doing something wrong, and it's hard to manage that guilt sometimes. So our heads are spinning with all of this for sure. I'll go back to the biology piece of it for a second because we've alluded to it, but I really wanted to talk for a few minutes about the difference between just everyday stress and chronic stress. Because stress is a part of being alive. There's stress out there. Things go wrong, we have a lot to manage, and chronic stress is very different. Our bodies respond differently to it. If we have situational stress or everyday stress, it's usually something that will end eventually. So I hate going to the dentist, I have to go to the dentist, I go, I sit, I'm done, I move on for at least 6 months. And that's situational stress. My body reacts to that by getting a little off kilter for, I don't know, a couple days or a couple of hours. And then when I leave the situation, my body handles its hormonal changes, recalibrates and resets, and I'm pretty okay, usually by the next morning when I wake up. If you have to take a flight somewhere and you hate flying, you go, you take the flight, you land, it's done. You know, same thing, unless you fly every day. You'll either get used to it or it will turn into a chronic stressor. So our bodies are built to handle that, and we do it really well, actually. We're very resilient. When it comes to chronic stress, though, so the analogy I use here is, if you're moving, it's stressful. So most people have moved or sitting in this room, it's stressful. You have to pack, a lot to organize, it's overwhelming. But if you're moving to a nicer home in a nicer area and your quality of life generally improves when you get there, that was a situational stressor. It stunk, you got there, you did it, and things are improving. If you're moving, but the place you're moving to is a lower quality of life and you feel isolated and there's no chance to change your situation once you're there, that move has now become a chronic stressor because there's no end in sight, and in a lot of ways, you feel a little bit helpless about the outcome. So who here has ever felt that way about parenting a special needs child? There's no end in sight, right? These are your kids, and sometimes you feel like there's nothing you can do about it. So here's where our bodies start to take a little bit of a different course. This isn't situational anymore. This isn't like a shot of adrenaline, you get through it, you sleep a little extra, you're okay. This is where all of a sudden your body gets the consistent message, this isn't going away. This isn't going away, we have to figure out a way to deal with it. And that is truly where the soldiering mentality comes in. And it's more than a mentality, it's also something physiological that happens in your body. The mindset is what we've been talking about. I've done this before, I'll do it again, I can't really think too big picture, one foot in front of the other, putting out fires, marching through it until you can collapse into your bed, or get through to your whatever it is you're looking forward to at the end of the day, wake up, rinse and repeat. What happens on a biological level is, not to get too scientific, but cortisol levels increase, and cortisol is a stress hormone. And cortisol is important because we're resilient, and we need to be able to survive stressful situations. You know, 10,000 years ago when we were living in a cave, our lifespan was much shorter, and those stressful situations were things like we don't have food to eat this winter. You know, there were no IEP meetings, and it was a very different environment, I'm guessing. But cortisol now has the same effect on our body. So really interesting, quirky things start happening. Something that happens when cortisol levels are elevated for a long time is our metabolism changes. So our body thinks that we aren't going to have food for the winter and starts to hold on to extra stores. So if you're prone to gaining weight, that will start to happen. If you're struggling with sleep, cortisol levels make it very challenging for you to sleep soundly because you're always on high alert because there's always a problem going on. So now all of a sudden, unless you're severely exhausted or using some sort of medication, it might be hard to actually go to bed and feel restful. If you have an autoimmune condition, if you have any health condition, if your back hurts you sometimes or your neck hurts you sometimes or whatever, all of those things start to flare up because your body can't waste any energy managing those things. You're really, on a biological level, soldiering, and you probably don't realize it. And then things start to slip because who has time to go to the doctor when you're parenting and juggling all of these things? And who has time to, you know, take a nap or get some rest or attend to what's happening? It's really, really challenging. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because a lot of times when any of us are in that cycle and in that mindset, you're so used to it. It's such an autopilot situation that sometimes you need someone to say, hey, you know what? This isn't what your body was made to be doing. There is a different way. And that's what I really want to be the take-home message of today. Not doom and gloom, like we're destined to be totally crushed by this stress, but that there is a way to be empowered, and that once you can really get a clear mental picture of what's happening, it's sometimes easier to make it a priority, to to change the way that you're coping with things, and to make self-care a priority. Because at the end of the day, all the efforts, and if we combine the efforts of every woman sitting in this room right now, I mean, I can't, the power and the energy and the intensity here is tremendous, what everyone would do to move mountains for their kids. So all of that can continue happening, and at the same time, you can take care of yourself. Because if you don't, what happens with cortisol is eventually, when the levels are elevated cortisol, we get sick. We can't, our immune system cannot tolerate all of that cortisol, and we start to become ill, we get hurt, and literally, like, we start to fall apart. Who's ever felt like they're falling apart? I've felt like that. Sometimes it's because actually, like on an internal cellular level, it's probably happening more than I'm aware of it. We need to pay attention to that. If I fall apart, if you guys fall apart, who's gonna juggle all those balls, right? Because I don't even know if you're confident that anyone else in your child's life even knows what all those moving pieces are. You know, it's sometimes very much can feel like a one-parent show, even if you do have support, even if you do have a community. So the message that I give, the reason I wanted the chapter on self-care to be the first chapter in my book is because as moms, we're not taking care of ourselves. If you're not taking care of yourself, it doesn't matter what you do. I could give you the most lovely, practical parenting tip ever, but if you're sick and tired and overwhelmed and stressed out and really on a cellular level struggling to hold it together, none of that matters. The appointments don't matter, the interventions don't matter. It's really the ability to sustain your parenting and to sustain that desire to want what's best for your child, to do your best to make that happen. So it's really important to make it a priority to engage in self-care, and I look at it as non-negotiable. So if you have a self-care regimen right now, that's awesome, and it's important, and it could be super simple, little tiny things, and I'll talk about some of them practically. And if you don't, just throwing it out there, it may be a good idea to commit to integrating one of them and to finding support. You're all in this room together right now. I also think there's sometimes this judgment, like if I go, get my feet rubbed or take, an hour to sit in my room and close the door and try to read a book despite, the circus that's happening, I'm going to be judged, or I'm not going to be a good mom, or, that all doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're your kid's mom. You have to take care of you so you can take care of your child. And if we can start this conversation here, my hope is always that it sort of spreads out a little bit. I want the self-care message to be contagious. I want it to be where you see other moms who are stressed out. And yes, I'm sure you would commiserate because, we all resonated when we were talking about it. But to be able to say, what can you do for yourself? What can you take 5 minutes? Can you take 10 minutes? Can you take an hour? Because we, as moms, a lot of times seek permission, right? There's this whole idea of, I need an invitation or I need permission. You can give yourself permission, which is super powerful. You can also give each other permission, because we're way more apt to demonstrate a level of care and compassion and kindness to our friends and other people in the community than we are to ourselves. So you can rely on each other a little bit there, but also think to yourself, what would I tell my friend? What would I tell, the other mom in the pickup line if she were experiencing this right now? You'd probably be much more apt to say stop for 5 seconds. Like, it's okay. If the homework doesn't get done, or if this doesn't happen, or that's not going to be the end of the world. But if you continue on this path, and the stress continues to mount, there will be more serious consequences for you, for your family. So that's why I feel like self-care is non-negotiable. I think, I don't go in order, so I have to see where I am so I don't get totally off track. All right, so making it a priority to take care of yourself is important, and how do we do it? So, I wish it were easy. I wish I could hand you guys 3 words and you're like, I do this. This is the self-care thing. It's fine. I'll put it in my schedule. But this happens in your real world. Because none of that stuff that we talked about at the beginning is going to go away. All of those things that you do have to manage, those are very real things. Those are responsibilities. Those are realities. So the first thing to work on is managing if there is any guilt around taking time for yourself. Just sort of sit with that and say, why don't I think I deserve that? because I'm betting that no matter how overwhelmed or stressed or whatever's going on, if your child needed to get somewhere, if there's something wrong with them physically and they needed to see a doctor, my guess is we would all get our kids to the doctor. And if they needed a prescription refilled, or if they needed, I don't know, a piece of a costume to bring to a school thing, whatever it is, we can make it happen. But I myself have, not gotten the dental work done until I'm literally in an emergency situation. I would have never let that happen to my child. How come, right? Why is there that different standard when it comes to self-care? Obviously, yes, kids come first in a lot of different ways, but these basic things, your health, your ability to rest, your ability to move your body and get exercise, because we were all supposed to be doing that biologically, your ability to have fun, laugh, and disconnect from the stress that's happening during the day and the week and the month and the year, all of those are things that really should be a priority. And something really interesting happens if it's not a regular event for you to engage in self-care and then you start doing it. At first, I always say to moms, you may have to pretend, you may have to fake it. It may feel really weird. And your kids or your family may look at you and go, what are you doing? You're leaving? You don't usually do that, or this is different. Right, so you have to accept that, and you have to completely own it. And you have to do it fearlessly, right? So whatever comes back at you, whatever feels like judgment, don't be afraid of it, and unapologetically. So some people are chronic apologizers. I think as moms, it's hard not to. We wind up apologizing to our kids for things where it's you do have to brush your teeth. I'm not going to apologize for that. But when it comes to self-care, practice doing it without apology. Because in reality, I don't think many other people in your life are looking for an apology. It sort of perpetuates that idea that there is something to feel guilty about when you do engage in self-care. One thing is also to give yourself permission to get help. So part of self-care is also taking the supermom cape, because we all want it, right? And some of us may feel like we have it some days or not or whatever, and it looks like other people have it. Take the supermom cape off, because that's way overrated and that's not real. And if you need help, ask for help. And if someone offers help, say thank you and accept it. Less I'm sorry's, more yes thank you, because that's going to help you balance your plate. And there are tremendous resources in the community. I know Parent to Parent is one in this area that can provide a lot of practical resources about, services and supports and school and advocacy. There are some pretty amazing Facebook groups in our geographic area, and then just more globally with regard to special needs, specific disabilities, dealing with schools, dealing with bullying. There's a lot that's going on there. So you can reach out for support, even if it's not someone, physically sitting right next to you, but there are also support groups. Lucy, I know you mentioned,
in our sector.
Yes, in the sector, there's a lot of people with a lot of information. And sometimes if you feel alone and isolated and almost like the duck, where it seems like everyone else knows something and you don't, if you ask, my experience has been personally, people are more than happy to share the information, because there was a time when they probably were sitting there thinking the exact same thing, feeling isolated. Less I'm sorry, more yes thank you, asking for help, accepting help. This isn't the glamorous part of self-care. This isn't the 2-day spa weekend and the, getting your nails done. This is really the nitty-gritty of it and what's going to make a difference, and probably where you might feel more comfortable in starting to push the limits and make some shifts and changes and seeing how it would feel. It's hard sometimes too if you always feel like you have to, the word advocate is something we all want to be for our kids. Sometimes it can feel like you have to be a crusader, especially, whether it's with a medical doctor or a family member, even sometimes, or, a school situation. So if you find yourself in those instances where you really feel like you're battling it alone, that's a really clear time to ask for help and to get some help, because you shouldn't have to feel like you're doing this by yourself. And you have some control over that by asking for resources and accepting them. The other thing to do is make an effort to connect with the people you do have in your life, friends, family members, people in the community, but connect with them not around your child. Because a lot of times what can happen, and this goes for any parent, more so for a special needs parent, but we get together and we talk about our kids. And if you're partnering with a spouse, you probably talk about your kids a lot. And it's really important and it's really healthy to try to have a 30-minute conversation every week or so. I'm setting the bar realistically low because we don't have any time and you do probably want to sleep and do other things. A 30-minute conversation every week that has nothing to do with your child or their child or anybody's child, about a silly TV show, about something, a world event, about something that makes you excited, about something that made you excited before you had kids or even thought about having kids. So, doing a book club, being able to listen to music with people, being able to get together even once a month and go do something, have a game night. It's tough when there's not that much time and it feels like time is always of the essence, which is why I say a 30-minute conversation is fine. And it's not that you're going to be dismissive if somebody wants to talk about a mom thing or a child thing, but you can make that need known and sort of say, do you want to go grab coffee and pretend you don't have kids? That could be a really just a very real statement, and it's hard to misinterpret that. So you're not really forgetting you have kids, your phone will be there, and if the school calls, you'll deal with it. But that laugh that you guys just did, that's important. That's self-care. And if you're doing that a lot, that's fantastic. Keep doing it. Don't feel guilty about it. It's helping your kids. And if you're not doing it enough, don't feel guilty about that either. Just try to make a little more space for it. So that's what this is all about. There is no right or wrong way to do self-care. This is not a black or white issue. But if you can have the mindset leaving here today that number one, self-care is important. Hopefully I did a good enough job of that.
You did.
And that self-care is something you want to move toward and not away from. And I like this idea, and I use this idea with my kids, and I use this idea at work. If we're just moving toward or away from something, it's like one step, a sway, a lean. It's not a right or wrong, because guess what? Today my self-care may not be as great as it could be on Sunday, but I'm not either, in the box or out of the box. I'm moving toward it or I'm moving away from it. It also, just word choice is important. When you say to yourself, I'm going to make an effort to move towards self-care, that's very empowering. You have the ability to do the moving. It becomes a choice all of a sudden. It doesn't become, I have to work on self-care. I have to get it. I'm not doing a good job with self-care. So all of that, that's stressing me out. That's now another thing on my list. I have to juggle self-care too. I'm doing that wrong. I can't forget that self-care thing. I'll just go back to my other 8,500 things I'm juggling. So it's not something that should feel like an onus that's on you. It's just, I'm going to try to move toward it. So if you move an inch, if you move a centimeter, you're moving toward it and you're aware of it, and it's empowering instead of becoming another ball that's flying through the air somewhere. Couple of other things, because I do want to leave time for questions and answers. Hopefully there will be some questions that I can answer. In order to really make this happen practically, one of the mantras that I use is to accept the mess. So whether this is a physical mess, I don't like messes. I tend to be a very organized, little type A person. Sometimes it's a physical mess. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the emotional mess. It's the fact that I just in the 11th hour got everyone in the car on time. Someone did forget something. I now have to go deal with that. But when I opened the door and my daughter got out, it didn't go like that. There was weirdness and it felt icky. So I can decide to perseverate on that for the rest of the day, dissect it and judge myself. What did I do wrong? What does this mean? And is she going to get through lunch? Or I can just say to myself, that was a mess. I say that. Sometimes out loud. I do sometimes think if people saw me driving, they'd be like, who's she talking to? I believe it more when I say it out loud. That was a mess. And I don't judge it. Because parenting is messy. Remember having the baby? Messy. Super messy. When they're a little messy, really messy. And we did the best we could. And everybody sort of, got figured out. But to me, when I started practicing that felt like self-care. I was being nice to myself. So instead of judging myself for what didn't go right. I was just acknowledging messy morning and tried to move on. It does take practice. It's not something that might roll off of your tongue easily. It might not be something you believe all of that readily. But when you can start doing that, it helps you detach a little bit. Great thing that happens there too is you can model that for your kids, because kids get hung up on things that don't go well, and if you can sort of say, yeah, that was messy, and now we're going to move on, because there's nothing we might not be able to fix it, we might not be able to go back and redo it, it was just messy, and now we're going to move forward, right? We're going to just move toward how we want things to be in the future. So that's sort of a helpful mantra. The other one that I really, really like is, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay for me to not be okay. It's okay for my kids to not be okay. Because if we set that parenting bar at the level of my kids have to be okay all the time, that's the stress is just going to go through the roof. Because our kids aren't going to be okay all the time. That's not their job. They have a lot to learn. If there are specific challenges that they're facing, those lessons are going to be harder. Harder for them to get through and learn, harder for you to watch. But if your kid's okay all the time and you're okay all the time, I don't know what's going on, right? There's probably not much being learned. That's not real. So if you can accept, it's okay for my kid not to be okay, it's okay for me not to be okay, and put the period at the end of the sentence. Don't do the, but if I had done it that way, or if I had this, or if I had, because that takes all of your power away. It's okay for things to be messy. It's okay for everybody to not be okay. When you start labeling things like that, right? Again, this is not the glamorous self-care. This is the nitty-gritty self-care. That helps combat the chronic stress, because you're giving your brain information. You're not saying it has to be this way and it isn't, and it hasn't been for the last 6 months, and now we're in chronic stress. You're saying that was messy, and that's a fact. And your brain will understand that. It'll go, oh, that messy goes in the messy category, and now we're moving on. It really helps rewire things. So these messages, these little mantras are really important. And if there's anything that you do write down, even though it's not magic, it would be, it's okay for things to be messy. It's okay for everybody to not be okay. Because you're giving yourself permission to just come as you are, and it will prevent that cycle of chronic stress from continuing. Checking my time, which I can't see right now. 10:20, okay. So I would love to answer your questions, because I could keep talking for hours actually. So I will stop and take any questions you guys have, if anybody has questions.
Okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I think the thing that happens the most in my house is sort of passing the stress blame ball, and then passing the who gets to have the pass. And I find that that is like a loop that we're in. So like, now it's my turn to be really, really upset and feel isolated, and like, you're not supporting me with my spouse, you're not supporting me, you're not understanding me. And then he gets to be like, okay, here, let me give you like this little day present. And then it's his chance to be like, oh my gosh, you don't really understand, I'm trying to work on this math stuff, and you're not really, you can't even add. I don't know how we got married. In PQ math with our son. And then it's my turn to say, okay, you need to go. But I feel like that's not helpful. I feel like we're just passing this thing back and forth, but not actually diffusing anything.
Yeah, so you're describing something super common, the tag team, right? Where I'll go until I'm about ready to hit the wall, and then we're going to tag team, and you're going to step in, but it becomes that ping pong game. And what probably is missing, or what could potentially be helpful, is when neither of you are escalated to that point. Like, there are those in-between times, right, where everyone's just sort of like, let's just keep this going, let's not question it, we're in a groove. And those are the perfect times to have conversations, but no one wants to. Because it's like, if we don't talk about it, it's not going to happen again, even though there's nothing in the history of your relationship that predicts that. So during one of those times where, there isn't a major stressful situation going on, it would probably be really interesting to shake it up a little bit and say, can we connect on this? And a lot of times it's tough, because the last thing that you want to do is stress your marriage even more. Having kids is stressful in marriages. having kids with special needs is stressful on marriages, for sure. So the last thing you want to do is like rock the boat. So if the approach you take is, I need your help, right? So this is the asking for help part. I need your help. And I really I know this is hard, but I really trust that we're going to be able to figure it out. That's usually not how the conversation starts. When I had these conversations, that's usually not how it started. It was more like, I can't believe this, and you don't understand. It was very much like this. When you open with, I really need your help, and this is hard, and I really trust we're going to be able to figure it out, it's not this. It's this. You're both on the same side, because there's no blaming, you have to swallow stuff and you have to let things go, but you're saying I don't want to be stuck in this loop, which means that you try something radically different. And it also means that in those instances where you guys probably keep some distance because everybody's putting out their own fire, those are the times where it's important to move toward each other and connect. So again, if you do find yourself sort of hitting the wall and then tapping out, hitting the wall and tapping out, the other thing you can do is say, this isn't working. So instead of the once a however often I get the little prize of like the break, no, it's on the calendar, right? We're not going to wait until I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to plan ahead, and I'm so grateful that you're going to support me. When you say things like that to a spouse, it's weird, like something happens in the brain again. I'm really so grateful that you're going to support me. You've set the precedent that you're going to be supported, and it goes much better than you would expect it in a lot of situations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it's just interesting because I find that is just, we don't think we do it until we're there.
Of course, right? Because the spaces in between are okay, right? And then you're in it, and it's emotional, and that's not the time to have the conversation because that's not going to go well. Probably, I'm just saying, just speculating. I think you had a question.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say everything you're saying. I had heard one time about the self-care, which I thought was I always try to keep it in my mind. They say there's a reason on airplanes why we have to put our oxygen mask on first, right?
Yes.
Because we're not going to be help to anybody unless we're able to breathe and survive.
100%. 100%. So you have to put your mask on, and you have to put your mask on first. I've never, thank God, been in that situation at however 30,000 feet in the air, but I'm guessing it's easier to do that because it is life or death, and it's very specific, and it's very situational, and we're thinking clearly. We just don't realize we're on the airplane, and we don't realize it's going down. That's the issue. But in some ways it is, and that's where if you can remember, like, this is not indulgent. Self-care is it's not selfish. It's not abandoning your child. It's not a luxury you can't afford. It's really critical, and if you don't take good care of yourself, you can't take good care of your kids. And so like everybody gets that. When you do have a minute to recharge or you're feeling less stressed, I parent much better. I'm much calmer. I'm not so easily rattled. I don't have as many of those times where I'm like, ooh, I should have said, recoil that thing I just said. So it does matter, but I love that airplane analogy.
Talking about siblings of special needs kids. So I always prided myself on making sure my eldest is special needs, my two younger are typical, and always made sure that I didn't give them too much responsibility. I made sure they had all the, my time if they needed it. Made sure that they didn't feel like that it was, impeding on anything that they needed to do. And so I always thought that I was like, their lives must be like wonderful. Right. I never put my stress onto them. I always make it look like everything's,
Great.
going fine. And now my daughter is in 7th grade now, and now when I hear stories about her day and stuff, she's like, gosh, one of my friends was like crying in the hallway. I was so uncomfortable with that. And there's so many more things of like, I don't like when people show emotion, and why can't people just hold it together? And I don't know how to deal with all that. And then I'm like, wait a second, I think I did something wrong here.
Mom, guilt, right?
So like, what would I say to my daughter to be like, now I realize that I made it seem like you have to be perfect with your emotions and not show anything, everything's got to be great. Right. And somehow she has fed into that. Now she feels like she can't show her emotions and her friends can't show her emotions. And so what would I do with her to
So great question. First of all, you have the insight, right, to look at the situation. The first thing I'm going to say is don't panic too much, right? Because we always, as parents, feel like, oh, I messed that one up, and it's irreversible now. So kids are so resilient. I have the privilege of working with kids. I have 2 kids. They're very resilient. And even at that age, even through adolescence, there's room. Like you still have some wiggle room there. So don't underestimate the positive influence of your trying to hold things calm on her, because now you're seeing maybe like a little side effect of it. You don't know. Like maybe if you were 100% transparent the whole time, she would be struggling with something else that was bigger. So you can't go back and say I should have done it this way or that way. But you can take the new information, another ball, let's juggle it, let's work it into the mix. And the word that resonated with me was, you said your daughter was uncomfortable with it, right? So that's a comfort level. I don't necessarily know if it's that she feels she can't show her emotions or she can't really tolerate it, but it's making her uncomfortable. So now was probably a good time to slowly start exposing her to or letting her see a little bit of the stuff that is more uncomfortable. You don't want to pull the curtain up like the Wizard of Oz and be like, this is all at once. But to talk about some things secondhand. Today when I don't know exactly what your situation was, I was dealing with this thing with your sibling, and it was really hard, and it made me sad. Just even acknowledging that you were having a negative emotion will allow her to see. The other thing too is kids are always looking at us. They may roll their eyes and turn their shoulders and actively ignore you, but you are the biggest influence on their life. They are taking in everything you say and do, especially when they're not supposed to be. So when you start modeling for her, mom has emotions. Negative emotions, she probably has seen you have positive emotions, but things like fear, sadness, a little bit of helplessness or hopelessness, little. It's not like you're going to be like, big panic, real world things, but I was having this exchange and I was feeling sad about it. You talk about it first, and in not much time at all, my thought is that your daughter you'll acknowledge you're having those experiences. You're probably the strongest woman she has in her life. If mom can do that and can handle it, then I can do that and I can handle it too. So I would sort of backdoor it a little bit. I wouldn't have necessarily a direct conversation, because at that age you're going to get a lot of no and you don't know and that's not happening. And just try to model some of your own experiences with negative emotion and the fact that you can get through it. I was sad, this is how I dealt with it, and then you know what, I felt better a little bit later. Or even saying, you know what, like I felt like I was going to cry when that happened because I was so frustrated. Little things like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Resilience, though. Kids are resilient, for sure. What else? And what else?
I'm kind of the polar opposite. But I find that for me now, in that heated exchange, which happens so often with my son, that I need that to escape. So for me, I go in the car and I used to say it's Miller time, for me it's Manilow time. And I just drive. And I drive and I try to calm down and I come back. But what I always feel that guilt about is that I've left this toxic situation. Because I see that it is going really bad, really fast, going nowhere, and it's explosive. And like her, I worry about my other child. Tutoring away at their computer in the other room. And I wonder how, for me it's helpful, I can regain my composure, I can go back into the situation. But how do I need to go. I gotta go. I gotta get out. I can see it's getting bad. I don't want to stay in that situation and try to be like her, very calm, and I think we need to, I'm just like, like run. I was joking the other day, like Dora's gonna write the next book, Running with Scissors, like running away from the car,
Right. So how do you deal with that? So one of the
and get the family to understand.
Yes. So one of the things is first fearless and unapologetic. The words you use to describe that situation to yourself are very important. Because I do think it's smart, right? When you're in a parenting situation and tensions are high, and the best is not working, in fact, it might be making things worse, disconnect, whether it's zip it, whether it's physically remove yourself. As kids get older, the removing may have to be more physical. So when you're recognizing what's going on, giving words to it and saying, I'm sorry, this is hard right now. I need 10, whatever. I need to drive so I can stay calm because I want to be able to help. And then you go. So you're giving, and I don't care if your kid's not listening to you,
Probably not.
Yeah, then you're saying it to yourself, right? But kids are always listening to us, always, even amidst like those out-of-body meltdowns that they're having. It will penetrate, they will hear that. So you've expressed that for your child, you've expressed that to yourself, and you can express that to your daughter who's on the computer. So I'm having a tough exchange with your brother. I need a few minutes to calm myself down. I'm gonna be in the car. Text me if you need anything. Something like that, right? You've not given her the language to understand it. You've been doing it, so they're making sense of it somehow.
I mean, they're gonna call the police.
Right.
You know?
And then you're making it very practical because you do have to take yourself out of the situation. And then when you come back, you can say, I'm glad I went for that drive because now I am calm. Instead of going in with the whole, I'm an awful mom, did I mess this up? Is my daughter okay? Blah, 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 all that. Yeah, like am I even going to be let back in? I'm glad I took that break because I needed it. You start saying things like that, I'm telling you, it doesn't take that many times to say it till your brain's like, wow, that feels much better. Let's do that. Let's say I'm glad I took that break. And I don't think your kids would say anything different. And, I don't think that the judgment is probably coming from them so much as from inside. But I don't know if there's a mom in here that would say, Nat, you should stay and continue to have conflict with your child. Your daughter to be seeing too. No, probably not. Probably not. And we're raising our kids with our temperaments. I talked about socially of those puzzle pieces, how friends fit together. Parents and kids do too. There are definitely times where one of my kids is easier to parent than the other, and sometimes it flip-flops, and sometimes it doesn't. I can't judge that. That is the reality of the situation. So your parenting is you. You can't judge that part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think it's great what you're doing, and I should probably do that. Because I'm guilty of not being able to walk away. And it's like I want to fix it, and I'm relentless, and I always make it worse. And then everybody's crazy in the house, and they want me to leave. But
They start their car.
Right. And I mean, I used to go in the garage and smoke, and I've really been good and trying not to smoke. I never think of going in the car, because if I go in the car, I'll probably end up at the gas station. It's hard to carve out a space in your house, especially when hell is going on, and then you're afraid. I'm in for 10 minutes.
Yes,
it's hard to walk away.
It's hard.
I really struggle with being able to walk away.
So one of the things that I know, Georgia, you're sharing your strategy, right?
I lock myself in the bathroom.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to turn the bathtub on because the noise otherwise is not lying. I'm not gonna. This is real world stuff. This is not glamorous self-care.
Sometimes I even have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I'm knocking on the door.
Forever, and that's when you say this is messy, but you don't have to open the door. Walking away, so it is a very powerful thing. So a lot of times it feels like I'm giving up, I can't fix this, I can't, but walking away is very powerful because what you're doing, and this sort of goes into a different area of parenting stuff, but I'll throw it in there. When we're engaged, when our kids, when we're doing this whole back and forth thing, we're throwing stuff back and forth. When you walk away, and you don't do it in a rude, spiteful, way that sometimes can happen, and you say, I need to take a break from this right now because I'm not helping you. You take all of your kids' stuff, right, their feelings, their thoughts, their emotions, you hand it back, and you walk away. So your child is left feeling their feelings, having their emotions, having to try to sort out their thoughts, and guess what, that's tough, because our kids love it when I want someone to help me deal with all that stuff all the time. It's important for them to start sitting with it because there will be a day that you're not going to be there to do it with them. And these are the lessons where parents will sometimes say to me, but they can't. Like, my child really can't. Okay, but if it's something they're eventually going to have to do, no better place to practice than at home. in that sort of nurturing setting, you're not abandoning and you're not leaving for 2 days. You know, everybody comes back. You're driving around, you're going to the garage. So, you know, I think giving yourself permission and actually making a plan, and say it ahead of time. When it's calm, say to your child, hey, you know what, next time we get like I start getting a little crazy, before it happens, I want you to give me a signal and I'm gonna go. Right? So lay that groundwork ahead of time so that you can practice doing it. And then once it starts working, you'll be like, hey, I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Hi, I want to talk about the situation when going away creates a lot of anxiety in your child, and especially like my child is ASD, and the situation is like, I'm not even talking about going to some movie and spa, I'm talking about parent-teacher meetings or like literally physical therapy appointments or doctor's appointment because I'm a physician myself. So he's like, you are a doctor, why are you going? And being a stay-at-home mom, so he just thinks that I'm the only one who understands him, which I totally, like even living with the father and talking about it, he would be in tears.
Yeah, hysterical,
Yes, and whenever I talk about that, I want to go back to the work, and he's just in tears that please, then daddy should be at home, which he's totally happy about it. Okay, I should let you go. But the thing is, like, definitely all the self-care in home, I'm trying my best, whatever, like going in a room or whatever. But
to go.
Yes.
And
this
this
is very difficult situation.
Right.
And I can see he's in tears, and that of course makes me feel whatever it is.
Bad.
I keep thinking,
Yes. So it's okay for him to not be okay, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't make you a bad mom. Does not make you a bad mom. And the more he practices that, the easier it will get for him. And then it'll get easier for you. I wish it were the other way around. It isn't. Like, if I leave and my kids are upset, I'm still, you know, like, I feel gross, I feel icky, but they'll adjust to it more quickly when there is a special need, right? ASD, so there's a lot there. There's a lot with communication and predictability and that want for comfort and sameness. But at the very same time, there will be many instances in your son's life where he's going to have to slowly build that skill set and that tolerance. So the best way to navigate that would be for you on a consistent basis to start spending time away so that it becomes more the norm. And again, it doesn't have to be hours and hours at a time. It might, I don't know how old your son is, but it might be as simple as I'm gonna go get the mail. Or, you know, I'm gonna, or times where you're gonna leave the house.
I'm walking little, like, I'm talking like, for example, psychotherapy, I'm going twice a week, and it becomes a norm for him, for example.
Right.
Like literally, even then, every time, even he knows, and that's very sweet because of the body. What he thinks is like over there, mommy, I'm gonna be back. If you just be relax and just sit on the birdie bench over there. It was so cute because he thinks, I would be anxious too, and I'm like, no, then just relax with your dad. But the thing is, yes, every time it would happen, even though if it's not a consistent basis.
It's still the same. So then it's just those words, and I know it's harder with communication too, to say, I know this is hard, you can handle it. And not to talk too much about it. Because sometimes we get into these like loops where you're just like, oh, I can't anymore, I've said it 100, I don't even know anymore what's happening. So you can answer him once, and the second time you say, no, it's hard, you can handle this, or whatever, you know, whatever you think he would understand, and then you can say, I'm not going to talk about it. Because some of it becomes habitual, sometimes almost scripted, where it's like, this is the dance we do before mom goes to physical therapy. And if you can not do that part of the dance, it might shift.
It's almost reinforcing.
Right, and we don't mean for that to be happening at all as parents. You know, we definitely want to just try to comfort. Sometimes that comforting in and of itself starts to make us feel awful. It gives our kids a lot of just, you know, what I say is, your child is spending a lot of brain space on that, and you want to cut that down. You don't want those neural networks to get any stronger than they are. Be factual, right? The more we think about and talk about stuff, the more brain space it takes up. Be factual, and then you can sort of set that limit there. So hopefully that's helpful. Go ahead.
Whatever you're doing, like I'm very good at taking care of myself. Like I ran at 4:30 this morning, you know, I find time, like I do all that stuff.
Right.
But I'm still unbelievably stressed.
Okay.
Like to the point, like I don't sleep at
Yes.
all. So like,
What do you do? So if you're feeling like you're doing really great at self-care, sometimes it's the surface stuff that you're doing. And I'm not saying stop doing all that. I mean, the self-care stuff, the glamour, whatever it is, like keep that up. That is important. But you might need to go a little deeper, right? So to figure out what it is that's stressing you out.
Oh, I know what's stressing me out.
Okay. Stressing you out.
Fully aware what's stressing me out.
Fully aware of what's stressing you out. And are the things that you're doing really addressing it, or is it like the Band-Aid stuff, like the running and the this and the that?
Well, that like makes me feel better in the moment, but then
Yes.
like the minute I'm back with my kids, it's there again.
Right. So is it that hands-on stuff with the kids that the stress is really coming from in those moments, going from like the zen to just in a complete state of, panic or whatever?
Depends on the day, but yes.
Which makes it harder, right? Because if it's predictable, at least you know what to expect. It's the lack of predictability. So some of these things we're talking about in terms of the language will actually be super helpful. Keep up everything else. But to say, today may totally be a disaster.
I do say that.
Yeah. And is that okay for you? Like, are you sort of like, that's okay?
It depends on what the disaster was.
Right. So, and in that instance too, maybe more connection there is important. So maybe it is more about also connecting with other moms who are in similar situations. I don't know if you have that to sort of feel that sense of community.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you do need someone else to call and just be like, you're the only one that's going to get this. Right? Like to other people, I may try, but they're not. So to look at that piece of it there. And also like with the help thing, asking for help, sometimes a little bit goes a long way. So if there are times with your kids where it's not working and you have the capacity to physically get help, whether it's to separate your children and have somebody take one kid somewhere, one kid, that's all, yes, if that's a possibility and you think that could help, then that's something that would be fantastic. So seeing if there's any room for...
My problem is my child with special needs can't go anywhere without me.
Right. So you're on.
So
you're on all the time. So you're in a situation where you are really so attached to your child that it's like you're trying to live your life and live your child's life too. Like there's no separation there, and that's deep, right. So that's deep. That's super deep. And so I'll put this out there, and I mentioned it before. So grief is what's coming up for me now. So I don't know if you've ever talked to anyone about that, but like the grief piece of that can make things, just harder to process, on a daily basis. And to see, you obviously know your situation better than anyone else, but being the only person who's able to do something with your child, that's a tremendous amount of stress. Chronic, right?
Yes.
Where's the end, right? What's going to happen? All those things. So just keeping those lines of communication open, and if you're parenting with a spouse or if you have a partner, to be able to say, I'm struggling with this, as often as you need to, until, there's a feeling, that there's some small thing that might change. So, it's a lot though.
Is it all right? Well, it's all right. But, a lot of us here experience a problem a lot of times with the school system. And the issues that we always have to sort of be this champion, et cetera. And I found for myself, like sometimes there's certain things that I just, like the district has done this campus thing now, where you can track all the assignments and all the thing, and I can't look at that. Because for me, that, daily stress of worrying about like seeing something, and for some people they need it, I know, but for me, it's like, the stress level. But there's an assumption, I think, from the school that you're looking at it.
Right.
And when something goes wrong, they're like, well, as you know, as I got an email last year, as you know, and I had no idea. Because I wasn't looking at it, because I was relying with my daughter, the relationship that we have, and I didn't realize that, there was some issue going on. And I found, like, I tried to be proactive this year to say, if there is an issue, you need to contact me.
Right.
But I didn't say it not because I'm going to look at that dumb campus and it's going to stress me out beyond belief.
Which is what I wanted. You edited that so that you can get your message across. And that's true. So we as parents are also dealing with technology and being bombarded with it. I have that same situation now where there's the parent portal, and if you get an email from a teacher, they're like, as you know, your child is missing. And I'm like, I don't know. And that's that kind of, I don't know. For a year, I didn't even know how to get on because there was some weird login thing. I had to call and have a find time to have a 20-minute conversation with the tech person who made a fake email. I don't even know how I get in, but I've written it down, like burned it in my mind. So I think that what you did as far as being proactive makes a lot of sense. Puzzle pieces, right? Whatever that is, the infinite care, whatever it is, doesn't fit with what's going on for you in parenting that child. You're not knocking the tool, you're just being realistic. And when you set that expectation and say, this is where I'm coming from as a parent, communicate with the school, communicate with the teachers, communicate with your child, that's the best you can do. Because again, you're juggling 85 balls and infinite, whatever it is not one that you can juggle right now. And, I think that if you communicate it in that way, it sort of just informs teachers as well, because I'm guessing that they're operating under the assumption because of the information they have. And again, it might work that way typically for lots of people. And if it doesn't work for you, it's okay to say it. I don't know I've never had an experience where something like that's really been shot down, and then you troubleshoot that if you have to. But yes. So you sort of ask for permission, right? About
because you feel like you're, especially when you talk to, I saw that you didn't hand that homework assignment in, and I was like on her case, and you're like, oh, I didn't even know.
I didn't know about the assignment. Right, exactly. It's tough.
So I feel like I'm like the poster child for like the most stressed, like all these like behavior, socialization, academic, functional, emotional, really sort of like, yes. And I often feel like, I know medically this doesn't make sense, but like my blood pressure would be 1,000.
Yeah.
If it would like be.
If you had the cup on you right now.
It'd be like 1,000. And it's like, even though, I probably don't do the self-care enough, but I do feel like those balls that I'm juggling, I can't afford to let any of them ever drop, because something bad will happen. Right. And and again, bad could be relative, but like things have fallen through the cracks that like are suboptimal. And then I also think my daughter is now 16, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, adulthood is not far away.
Right.
And there's all those things to deal with too. And we are going to be linked together forever. You know?
Right.
It's like there is not an end.
Right.
There's like an end to some things, but not a lot of things.
Yep.
And those balls are like, and I could definitely screw up and not have things done the right way.
Right.
And that's going to affect her for the rest of her life.
Yes.
So
I said this a little bit in the beginning. Some of the balls are, so if we're in a school, I won't say too loudly, but like if the homework doesn't get turned in tomorrow, everyone's going to wake up, we're going to move on. That's a ball that, technically if it drops, it bounces. If kids, I don't know, if they eat frozen food or fast food tonight one night, like that's a ball. If the laundry, the this, the that. When it comes to things like medical care, future planning, making sure that, I'm stressing people out right now, making sure that those resources are planned for, right? Because those are those big ones that are lingering. There's no infinite campus or whatever for is your child financially secure for their future if they have a disability that prevents them from providing for themselves. You're right. And that is the reality of the stress of special needs parenting. So the best I can offer is, of the balls you are throwing around, find the ones that sort of can be dropped or delegated. So you had talked about your children and not wanting to put on them, right? Which is fine, but kids can take some responsibility. Even some kids with special needs can take more responsibility than we give them. Certainly, kids without special needs can take responsibility. It doesn't mean that they're being parentified or it's their responsibility, but unload the dishwasher. Because I can't right now, right? And I'm not going to apologize for that. I know. Or
get your own water.
No. Like, what about no? No, I can't right now.
Right.
Okay? Without saying I'm sorry. So delegating any of those that you can, and then calling in your help, your spouse, your partner, whoever you have, and make a list of the things that are non-negotiable. We have to do future planning. We have to make sure we have a will. We have to make sure, all of that stuff, the big scary stuff. Yeah, that's the stuff, you're right, you can't afford to drop, so you need a plan. It helps me to put things in writing. I'm a list girl. And, to make that a priority and call in your help with that. Use the community that you have. I know there's a lot of attorneys in the area who help, coaching parents with that. There may be some parents in the room who have done that already. But those big things, yes. And then it's interesting. I work with a family, actually, very young children. And this mom was literally developed an anxiety disorder. And at the end of the day, she's like, I don't know what's going to happen to him, and I don't want his older brother to have to take care of him for the rest of his life. And so she and her husband it took like 6 months and went through the process and set everything up. And she said, that was the best present we ever gave ourselves. Because my son doesn't know it wasn't on anybody else's radar. But, that for her was a game changer. And at the end of that process, the rest of the stuff that she was juggling didn't feel as dire, because that one big thing all of a sudden was organized and T's crossed, I's dotted. So when you do have big things like that, making it a priority to get that stuff done is important.
Now, so those who don't know me, I'm the director of special education here, but I'm not speaking as a director, I'm speaking as a mom. One of the things that you said before made me start thinking about soldiering, right? Because I am the lead soldier in my family and dealing with 2 children that have pretty significant health issues. I'm wondering, or kind of my aha moment, is that I think at times it may be easier to soldier than to deal with the deeper feelings and the grief and the fear and all of that. So to just keep on and be that strong soldier that's got it under control, because if that's relaxed a little bit, those other feelings come in and they're much more uncomfortable than being tired and stressed.
Yes, 100%, because soldiers are not vulnerable. And it's exactly what you said. It's more than just the habit. It's a coping mechanism, because if you're moving and if people are counting on you, you can't be scared if your troops are scared. You can't fall apart if your troops are falling apart. What happens if the soldier falls apart? And I think for anyone who's ever had that experience in life and sort of that personality or that temperament, there's a fear that you won't be able to put yourself back together. There's a fear that your not being in control will have a detrimental impact and that everything will fall apart. So, you can try it once. Try falling apart. And it sounds bizarre. So I don't know. That's the brain behavior person in me. If I'm doing something and I know it's not working, my only option is to try something different, which means I may have to plan to have what I call a grown-up temper tantrum, which is where you cry till you can't breathe, and everyone looks at you like, wow, I don't know. What happens a lot of the times? Everyone around you starts to rally. And they look at you sort of falling apart and they go, whoa, wait, hang on. I rely so much on this person and they're maybe not going to be there. I have got to get it together as much as I can. And they start to show up. And it's not about you actually falling apart, but it's that shift that happens when you start to say, this is too much, catch this. There may be a little bit of a shift in that. And then you can, at your own pace, deal with the stuff that's underneath it. You don't have to be swallowed by grief or pain or desperation or any of that stuff. It's there and it's big and it's scary, but you don't have it'll knock and it can be there and you can say not now, I'm not ready yet, or so it doesn't have to swallow you. Does that make sense? Okay. So we have 2 more minutes before I have to scoot. I can take one more question.
In soldiering, I find that we get a lot of conflicting messages, because you read material from, other moms or other resources, and it's always saying your child is not going to progress as quickly if you're not there soldiering, if you're not there pushing, if you're not there doing this, that, and the other, keeping your list, or making sure you're getting the checkpoints. But then you go to school and you have these wonderfully compassionate therapists and teachers who are saying, I'm sorry you have to do this. I'm sorry that we want you to step back a little bit. We want you to not do this. We want you to not soldier so much. We want you to let us do some of this stuff, or we can help with this stuff. So conflicting, so confusing.
Right. And I think what you hit upon is that idea of creating the community and making those connections, because it is true. You are your children's strongest advocate. No one else is going to get in front of the bus for them, and that's the way it is. That's what you signed up for. But it doesn't mean you have to do it alone. So So I think the smartest way to advocate and stay sane and be there for your kid for the long haul is to really build that community and that team. And you can be the one overseeing and sort of, I don't want to say calling the shots, but you're the parent, so at the end of the day, yes, you're the one with the final say. But to allow other people to help and to come on and to be part of that team, I think it's so important. And it doesn't mean that you're not on the front line and you're not there. It means you're human. And it means that you have to take care of yourself. Respite care is something I talk a lot to families about too. Going on vacation, maybe not all the kids can come on vacation at the same time, depending on the disability, which is sad and heartbreaking, but sort of okay because you have a team and you have, a network of support, hopefully, that can help you parent through that. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm sorry because I would love to answer questions forever, but I do have to run to get back to my office. I totally appreciate everybody's time today. There was a sheet there if anyone's interested. And thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We really appreciate it. I hope everyone got some good information from it and filled it so you can share with your friends, and we'll be sending that out. We also have a flyer, I want to call it, thank you, Stephanie, about some material that are related to this. There's an article, the article that sort of spearheaded this idea was in a special parent magazine called When Mama Needs Help. And, recognize that, let's read about this and see if we can help our community here. But there's some other articles, and they're all going to be posted on this special ed PTA website.
They're already there.
They're already there, okay. And so you can, click on there's a reminder, you just take a flyer. And then do you want to talk about the event that's the other event that we have the flyer for?
Sure. I'd like to ask Danielle to, Danielle's been doing some interesting work with the Exceptional People Committee, and she had a great event in October. We want to thank her and have her do a little talk about what's going on, because it's been a great week. Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah. So I lead it's called the Exceptional People Committee, and it is a committee through Newcastle trying to better the lives of all people with disabilities. And one of the things that we have implemented that I encourage everyone to do, it's called I Want You to Know. And it's basically a two-sided form to fill out to let people know anything about a person with disabilities. And this could be a child, an adult, this could be someone with Alzheimer's, dementia, or a child with autism, if you have a child with epilepsy, anything like that counts. And what it is, it's a basic, simple form that they will keep on file, and if they ever have to, they or the fire department have to come to your house, they will have this information. So something as simple as your child is scared of sirens, they will turn the sirens off while they get to your block, so they won't scare your child. It also does something if your child is nonverbal, if your child has diabetes, if they come to your house and God forbid you can't talk, it will speak for you. It also, how can they de-escalate a situation if your child's upset? Is there certain things they shouldn't say? Is there certain things they should say? And also, if you want to add a photo, God forbid your child gets lost, that's also there as well. You just have to hand it in. It's actually online as well. If you want to go on the Newcastle, website, it is there.
We'll link to this on our website too.
Yes.
So we'll make sure that there's a link there, so you can get it both ways.
And the other thing that they also have now, it's a little decal. You can stick it either on, says the occupant with autism may not respond to verbal commands, Newcastle Police. You can get it for free at the police station for anyone who wants it. You can either put it in your car, your house, both. Some people could use it as if, God forbid there's a fire, you can put it on your window, and, you said your child sleeps here, you could have that instead. Some people can have it in their car. This way, they were saying, like, God forbid, you're not verbal, and you can't talk, and now your child can't talk. Now they might not know that your child couldn't originally talk, and they think the child's a head injury, or they're not understanding, or it helps them to help the situation go more smoothly and quicker for everyone. And it's just one less thing that you have to stress about. We are trying to work on getting one that is more just special needs versus autism, more generic sticker. Unfortunately, they didn't already exist. This one did, so we didn't have to like create it, so it was easy to get, but we're working on creating one. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
How is the piece of paper linked? So if you called in 911 or somebody calls 911.
It's connected to your address.
So they'll see it.
It will
on
automatically
here.
come up, and if the fire department comes, the police always come, so therefore it also will be linked.
They had something like that years ago.
Yes.
And I did that, but you didn't say anything about a picture on file.
Right, so you can put a picture on fire if you like. It's up to you.
It was more about kids getting lost.
Yes, so that was more of a generic, if a child got lost. You know, we have changed it to be more specific, more for people with disabilities. And like I said, this does apply to adults with disabilities, including, as they said, they've had problems where it's dementia or Alzheimer's, wandering around, the person can't talk. Like, they encourage it for any disability. It's just more deep for that versus just children in general. They used to be that you could put it just for your child. You know, it was more, you know, that.
Child find.
Yeah, it was called a kind find. And it was more for a missing child. Not be your child got missing. It was like, oh, these are the basic facts of my child: height, weight, hair color. This is more specific. Like, for example, it says wandering. Is this person inclined to wander? So do you have suggestions for attracting their attention? Like, for example, my son doesn't talk that much. I wrote on here, if you're calling Spencer, he's not going to say, I'm here. But if you say, Spencer, come here, Spencer will come to you. So they should, if they were calling him, right, Spencer, come here versus just Spencer. Because he can't answer, I'm here. So, but if you said, come here, he would come to you. You know, so like things like that are what's important.
Can you talk about more of what else is going on with your committee?
So we did have the event at the library, which went pretty well. We had EMS, fire, and police, and they were talking about, you know, all of them talked about what they did. It was a chance for them to see in the full fire suit, you know, to not be scared. We practiced very briefly because the rain was not cooperating. We wanted to do more street safety, crossing the street, that kind of stuff, but it was a very quick thing. We are also working on a few things in town with employment. We are trying, I've been playing phone tag with someone for like literally I think a month and a half now, to have internships in town for people with disabilities at all the stores. That is a goal. We are also looking into doing, I know Trish wants to spearhead this, who owns Hip Kids, spotlighting a student of the month. And the student will be spotlighted for something good they did, not because they were, you know, got A's on their test, but because they stuck up for the kid who was a bully. They reported something, and then that child will then get maybe like free pizza at Pizza Station and an ice cream, you know, like something around town, like, you know, she'll have the picture in the window, student of the month and why or whatever. We have to kind of figure out how that would work, how people would be nominated, that kind of stuff. We're also working on maybe having a day at Habitat for Humanities for people with disabilities to go and volunteer. If they can actually work on the house, great. If not, maybe just planting flowers and, you know, like stuff like that. So it could be all different levels and ages. I think you technically have to be a certain age to do like woodwork and stuff. It has to be I think either 16 or 17. Like technically you can't have like a 12-year-old working on a house. But they could have flower planting or, you know, like something that everyone can participate in some fashion like that. You know, we were trying with not much success to identify adults with disabilities in the town. I got 3 responses. To do classes, maybe a book club, to do exercise class, you know, things like that. Can't seem to find, even though I know they live here. So that's another thing we are working on. So, and we are open to suggestions for anyone. If anyone thinks of anything they would love to see in the community, you know, feel free to contact me. So, anyone?
I have a suggestion.
Sure.
Just for social groups. Just someone who, you know, I just haven't found resources in the community with support, with social, you know, really socializing or fitting in when, I don't know.
No, I mean, that
it hasn't been a problem, you know, it hasn't been like, a red flag. It's my awareness as his mom.
You know, and there's
So-
definitely, that's something that's why we were saying, we were trying to find like young adults, and we were trying to, teenagers, that it would be like book club, that maybe everyone wants to read a sci-fi book or something, like anything, or if it was an exercise class or something. We were trying to get that. We haven't found the population who's interested is the problem, to know what classes we would try to set up. So if we can get a group of people who are like, hey, my kid is X, Y, and Z, this is their ability, and we all would like to do a woodworking class, we can then go to town and see they do woodworking classes. Why can't they do a woodworking class for people with disabilities? It's just a matter of having the population. Yeah.
Or include them in
But do we need a new activity, or do we just need to all decide that we're going to do Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, or that we're all going to do?
Is the answer. The answer is either. Like if it was a group of 5 or 6 people, like I know, for example, like Jody's gym. Like when my son was little, there was a class for people with disabilities at Jody's gym, and then there was no longer a class because we were the only one who wanted to take the class. And they weren't going to do a class for one kid. If you can always get the population, I feel like any place is willing to work with us. It's a matter of having the population that's interested. If you came to me and said, I got 4 or 5 people who want to do X, like that's so easy then to get that class going, because I find if you come to the people, they're not going to say no. It's when I don't know what's wanted and who's interested that,
Well, conceptually, I think your question is, it's better, we're an inclusive school district.
Right.
It's better to include our typical kid, our
Right,
yeah.
special needs kids with typical kids to the extent possible. That's
obviously,
awesome.
yes.
So, like, there was the town of Newcastle did like a dog training class.
Yes.
And it was so wonderful, and I signed my daughter up, who's fairly significantly challenged, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, it was a typical thing. We also have like the VIP soccer, which is more
Soccer and basketball,
and
yeah.
basketball that's more segregated. But for another thing is we've got a wonderful wrestling program, and boys and girls can go, and it's more fitness oriented, but that's open to all kinds of kids. There's a buddy program there as well. So, to the extent that we can get our kids to do Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and rec activities included or whatever they need, please do that.
Yeah.
I think that people keep talking about the playground
Yes.
as this wonderful opportunity, but also an extremely challenging time for kids who have social challenges, and it always kind of comes back to, okay, here's this opportunity and this void, and how do we do something like that? We have our kids here.
Well, I started the Buddy Bench at West Orchard for that exact reason.
And how do we have someone who's facilitating, because we know that.
Well, the Buddy Bench, it does facilitate, like how it works is, and I wish it was at every school, I don't know why it's not. Essentially, if a child sits on it, each class has Buddy Bench watchers. And they have to watch the bench. If they see someone at the bench, it's their job to then go over and ask them to play. And it has worked very well, and the kids have all talked about it. The kids want to be Buddy Bench watchers. It's exciting. It's a positive thing, and then that's how
They're facilitating that.
they are facilitating that way. The aides obviously are aware of who the Buddy Bench watchers is, and they're kind of watching the bench, and they're supposed to be like, hey, you missed someone, go. But
Who sets up the Buddy Bench watchers? Because I know that at our elementary school we discussed it, but we didn't have that piece of it at the time.
So we had so they kind of rotate classes who are responsible, and then they had 2 to 3 Buddy Bench watchers in the class for the week. So each kid can kind of get a chance to be a Buddy Bench watcher. And so it's like they pick the class of the week. This class, it's Miss Jane's class this week, and she picks 3 kids, and she can rotate through the year that, and that's how they did it, just because, the 4th grade, you can have a 4th grade Buddy Bench watcher. Each grade has
Kids are
their
actually going to the Buddy Bench.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
They did that.
Yes, good job. Well, I didn't come up with a Buddy Bench, but I did bring it to the
That's
school.
sustainable because the principal is taking it on? Because I think.
So
what
they
you're
had a
saying
whole
is, like,
thing, so the
adults-
principal announced it. They made a big deal about it at West Orchard. They had the bench on the stage, and they revealed it, and each class talked about it, and then they had an assembly about it, and it became a very positive thing. Like, everyone really wanted to do it, and they also explained the rules of the Buddy Bench. Like, if someone comes over and says, I want to play with you, and you're sitting on the Buddy Bench, you can't say no. Like, you can't be like, I'm waiting for someone better. like, they were like that way also. Like, you're sitting here and you didn't want to play with that kid, you'd rather play with that kid. That doesn't count. Like, someone asked you. So they were taught the rules of the Buddy Bench. Each class goes over it. And then they kind of, went from there. And so it really worked. And then I think then it's up to the teachers to assign the buddy bench watchers, but it started,
I mean, I think that sounds great, and I was initially against the buddy bench because I felt like kids who actually needed the buddy bench wouldn't use the buddy bench. They'd stay as far away from the buddy bench as they possibly could.
You'd be surprised.
But I think that if it's being used that way, and it's great that the kids are doing it, but in the same way that we're saying, when we wanted to do these classes or whatever it is, if there's an adult who's ultimately responsible, I think that there does need to be an adult.
Yeah, so there's always aides on the playground.
Ultimately, kind of overseeing it and making sure that.
There's aides always whatever grade that's on the playground, so they ultimately, yes, they are kind of there facilitating it. But from what I've been told, because I haven't actually watched, but I heard the buddy bench watchers take their jobs very seriously. Like, people have told me their kids are like, I'm a buddy bench watcher this week. I'm like, it's a big deal.
They want to do it. They're
And I just, before we are going to have to move on, thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you, Lucille, for putting together this fantastic program. We got a lot going on. So tomorrow we're going to be back here from 11 to 12. The district is coming to talk about dyslexia. So we're having Acting Superintendent Eric Byrne, Heidi McCarthy, Mary Ford. We're getting a rundown. At least Karen Visser is coming from the board, and I know we're getting at least another board member. And so this is a chance to talk about this issue, which has been basically, I've been here for 14 months. This is what has been on the plate since then. So please come out, come listen. It is going to be recorded. We didn't have a lot of selection for dates, so we took what we were given. So it will be recorded and will be posted. And in also that vein, I want to thank Deb Donaldson from the library, who has partnered with Chappaqua Parents for Dyslexia, and is welcoming Lydia Soyfer to the public library on December the 1st. The flyers are over there, 7 p.m. It's a Thursday. And she's going to talk about the art and science of reading. So she is going to talk about evidence-based approaches to reading difficulties. She's
amazing.
Yeah, she's a renowned expert.
She's worked with
and it's a really great opportunity. So, library's big. So those these guys. It's a wonderful space. So,
What that ADHD? That one.
The
Parent University?
Yeah. Parent University. Heidi is doing Parent University on November 29th. So that is going to be the companion piece to the high school keeping your scattered child on track, and plus Canvas, which was like its own thing. So, but Heidi also promised to do this for the rest of the kids, because the reality is, if your kid's still scattered by high school, so we're gonna talk about this for the younger grades as well. There may be some Canva fill-ins for people who weren't able to make Canvas fill-ins for people who weren't able to make the high school meeting. So this is going to be a very good opportunity to help your children get organized. Middle school is really the ramp up. And if you can get them even before that, where you're not running after them with all of their stuff, it's probably better for you. So we are going to talk about executive function and school skills. So we have a lot on our plates, and we have National Inclusive Schools Week coming up. I want to thank my chairs for pulling that together every year. And parents come and help out. It's the best opportunity to see your children be their best selves, your average ones, and your needs children. And the more we buy in, the stronger these programs are. Thank you for coming out, everyone. Thank you so much.